Welcome to the first Natick High School Politics Club mock presidential debate. We are joined by students playing the two presidential candidates. The two actors playing the candidates are simply that, actors, and are representing the viewpoints of the Trump campaign and Biden campaign, not themselves. Tonight's debate has been divided into 9 topics, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question, uninterrupted, followed by 2 minutes of open discussion. The debate is hosted by Natick High School Politics Club. We meet Thursdays at 2:30 every week. Information about Politics Club can be found at the end of this debate. Tonight's debate is moderated by 4 students. Myself, Lincoln Annabali, President of the club, Connor Flynn, Vice President of the club, Nate Lord, Secretary of the club, and Hayden Brown, the Treasurer of the club.
We will now introduce our 2 candidates, Alex Edwards as President Trump,
and Emma Hoffman as former Vice President Joe Biden.
Thank you to our candidates for joining us. Our first topic is on foreign policy. Mr. President, I start with you. What have you done the past 4 years to improve America's stance on the world stage?
Well, Lincoln, the real question is, what haven't I done? Okay, I'm the first president in a very long time who's speaking to a North Korean leader. The first president in maybe eternity. I got peace in the Middle East. I sent the best people. We got peace in the Middle East. It's done. Israel is okay now. Everything's fine now. I moved to Jerusalem. I moved the embassy to Jerusalem. All the other presidents, they were too scared to do it. But I was the man who pulled the trigger, and I moved the Israeli embassy to Jerusalem. I got the USMCA done. All the other presidents, they were too scared to do it too. But I pulled the trigger. I did it. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you heard about ISIS? They're done. We dealt with them. We killed all the baddies. I dealt with ISIS. They're over. Quite frankly, I think the real question is, what haven't I done on the world stage? That's what I've got to say about that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Vice President, what will you do going forward to change and improve America's stance on the world stage?
So this president has completely ruined all of our relationships with other nations of the world. He asks, what hasn't he done? But I would ask, what has he done? Our allies can no longer trust us. He disrespects the military, and he completely blew the coronavirus crisis. He's met with dictators instead of forming lasting relationships with our allies. He's sent our troops into countries unnecessarily, and he's tried to form relationships with countries like Russia and North Korea instead of protecting relationships with our allies in Europe. He dropped out of the Paris Climate Accord, which has left the rest of the world not being able to respect the United States. And if I were president, then I would make sure that we are able to form lasting relationships with our allies again, so that the rest of the world knows that the United States is a country that they can trust. I'm a man of my word.
Your time is up. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We're now going into a response time for President Trump to please respond, or Vice President Biden to respond. Please, Mr. Trump, you can begin.
Joe Biden doesn't know what he's talking about, okay? Talking about foreign policy, at least I wasn't drone striking thousands of children in the Middle East like the Obama presidency was, okay? You know what? I don't know where to go with that. The Paris Climate Agreement was bad for the United States and bad for everyone. I got us out because that was good, okay? I pulled our troops out of the
Paris Climate Agreement bad for the United States. It was a deal that we would become more eco-friendly by the year 2050.
It was too expensive for taxpayers.
Thank you, candidates.
Thank you, candidates. We're now going to move on to COVID. My first question is for Vice President Biden. Upon being elected, what immediate actions would you take to provide relief to the many Americans undergoing intense financial hardship?
As president, I would have a completely different response from this current president. This president has let 225,000 Americans die. He has not given funding to be able to supply businesses and schools so that they're able to reopen. And he hasn't passed a second stimulus check that has been passed in both the House and the Senate. If I were president, I would get that stimulus check into the hands of the American people immediately because I know that they really need it. And I would make a mask mandate so that all Americans are required to obey safety protocols, and I would listen to the science. I wouldn't speak about issues that I have no idea what I'm talking about, like injecting bleach into ourselves to cure ourselves of the coronavirus. I would listen to the doctors, and I would make sure that a vaccine gets out when it's safe.
Thank you. Now to President Trump. With over 200,000 Americans dead and a third wave of coronavirus on the horizon, what actions will you take to decrease the rising American death toll?
Look, early on in the coronavirus pandemic, I shut down travel. I think that was the best move that I could have made. We got Operation Warp Speed done. We're working on the vaccine. We have all the supplies we need, and I got the original stimulus check through. And you know what? We're going to get a new one. We would have it much sooner, but crazy Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are trying to slow it down in Congress right now. But I tell you what, my good friends in the Congress, we're going to get that stimulus to all the Americans who need it, and it's going to be great. If the Democrats in the Congress wouldn't stop slowing it down, they would already have it by now. Joe Biden talks about no action from President Trump, but the real inaction is coming from the Democrats in this pandemic. Okay? This virus, it only has a 1.8% kill rate. It's madness. It's madness. I shut down the economy. I shut down the world's greatest economy to save Americans, and I reopened it. And now we're on track to have the world's greatest economy yet again.
Thank you. Vice President Biden, a chance to respond.
Yes, thank you. I have a question for the president. You knew that this pandemic would occur in January, and you didn't tell the American people. Didn't they deserve to know?
This pandemic is overblown. It is not nearly as bad as the mainstream media and CNN and the fake news are making it out to be. That is why I did not shut down the economy when I did. But then, when it got out of hand, I shut down the economy. I banned travel. I did all that. But right, it's all been blown out of proportion.
So would you say that 225,000 Americans dead is blown out of proportion?
That's not the real statistic.
Yes, it is.
That's not the real statistic. Those numbers are overblown. Joe Biden doesn't know what he's talking about.
And there are millions more Americans with permanent health conditions due to the coronavirus.
Sleepy Joe Biden doesn't know what he's talking about.
Families have had to worry about their loved ones in the hospitals.
Sleepy Joe Biden doesn't know what he's talking about.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will now be moving to healthcare. To you, Vice President, Mr. Trump has said that your healthcare plan would kick Americans off of their private insurance. Is this true, and what does your plan entail?
No, of course it's not true. Trump is the only one who wants to take Americans off of their healthcare. My healthcare plan is to expand Obamacare. We need to create a public option for anyone who wants it. And although the president claims that those with pre-existing conditions will be covered, that's not true. He's been trying to take away everyone's health care through the appointment of the Supreme Court justices. He's said multiple times that he wants to overturn Obamacare.
Thank you. For this topic, the second question will go to Mr. Trump. You have said repeatedly you plan to repeal the Affordable Care Act. In doing so, millions would be stripped of their health care, especially those with pre-existing conditions. Yet, you say that those with pre-existing conditions would not lose their coverage. How would this be done?
That's absolutely right. I do plan to repeal Obamacare because Obamacare is bad for Americans, it's bad for the taxpayers, it's bad for everyone. But people, with pre-existing conditions, will not lose their health care. That is a lie that has been put in place by the mainstream media and the fake news. The people with pre-existing conditions will not lose their health care. It's all about choice. The American people deserve a choice. And Joe Biden and his socialist friends like AOC and Ed Markey want to nationalize our health care. And that's not good for Americans. That's not America. That's not Donald Trump. So I will be repealing Obamacare. And people with pre-existing conditions will not lose their health care.
Joe Biden, a chance to respond.
It seems to me that you want to give Americans fewer choices because I'm giving them another choice with a free public option. I believe that healthcare is a right, and there are so many Americans who are struggling to be able to pay for their healthcare. Taking away Obamacare seems like it would be taking away those people's right to be able to have access to healthcare.
Obamacare, it's expensive for the taxpayers. It's bad for all of us. People deserve the choice to have health care. Joe.
Well,
America is not a socialist country. We should not nationalize our industries.
Well, under my plan, we would get rid of the capital gains tax loopholes in order to raise taxes on the wealthy, so everyday Americans wouldn't be paying for this plan.
We shouldn't be raising taxes on anyone. Are you trickle down economics?
Okay, gentlemen. Sounds great, but we'll get into that later. Our next point of discussion here tonight is the topic of race in America. And my first question is for Vice President Biden. Vice President Biden, you have promised to restore what you call the soul of America if you win. How does that relate to issues of racial justice?
Thank you. So I believe that under this president, race relations in America have declined significantly because there's been a rise of white supremacist groups. He signaled white supremacist groups in one of the last debates. And after the Charlottesville protests, he said that there were both great people on both sides. I believe that we need a policing reform. So that doesn't mean we're going to defund the police, but that means that we're going to reallocate the funds that we are spending on the police to go to other places.
Okay. Thank you, Vice President Biden. My next question on this topic is for you, Mr. President. Mr. President, your critics say that you've inflamed race issues and you have caused a divide in America. How would you respond to that?
Fake news has been calling me racist since 2016. That's the fact of the matter is that is just outright false. I condemned the Charlottesville incident as soon as it happened. I condemned all those white supremacists. But I think the real issue is that Antifa and those on the radical left are inciting violence. Okay? They're over there burning the cities, killing people, hurting people, and that's the real problem. Under my presidency, black unemployment has been the lowest it's ever been. Okay? You can't call me a racist when we've got Joe Biden on the other side of the stage. I just think it's ridiculous that the radical left is inciting violence and they're calling me the racist. It's ridiculous.
All right, and thank you, Mr. President. Vice President Biden, a chance to respond to that.
Sleepy Joe forgets to turn on his mic yet again.
So this president thinks that Antifa is a bigger problem than white supremacist groups like the Proud Boys. And he breaks up peaceful protests in front of the White House because this president is a racist.
Mr. President?
That is just not true. I'm the least racist person in this room. That is
all right.
Fact.
How can you say that when there are people of color sitting not in this room but in a debate room? And if I were elected president, then my vice president would be Kamala Harris. So I think that she would be able to really help our country to be able to unite.
Joe, you
Sure.
are on record saying you ain't black if you don't vote for Joe.
Now, just one follow-up for you, Mr. President. You said on stage about now 3 weeks ago, when Vice President Biden asked you a question, said, stand back and stand by to a white supremacist organization? Would you like to make clear
That's
what
not
you
what I meant by that. That's not what I meant by that. The fake news media has been twisting my words. They're twisting my meanings. That's not what I meant by that.
Mr. President, what did you mean?
Well, I was telling them that there was time to stand back and stand by. That's what I meant. They're saying, look, I think the real problem is the radical left.
All right, and thank you, Mr. President.
We are now moving on to the topic of the Supreme Court of the United States. My first question will go to Vice President Biden. Vice President Biden, you've noted that you disagree with the way the Supreme Court of the United States has been handled in the appointment of certain justices, namely Amy Coney Barrett. If elected, what is your plan for the Supreme Court?
Thank you, Hayden. My plan for the Supreme Court would be to reverse everything that President Trump has done. He appointed Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court and went against Ruth Bader Ginsburg's last wishes to have a nominee appointed after the election. And he's been part of this hypocritical movement that said that when it was the end of Obama and my term, that we couldn't appoint Merrick Garland, but they can appoint Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court at the end of his term.
Thank you, Vice President. My next question is for President Donald J. Trump. Mr. President, you've repeatedly remarked on the fact that Biden will, quote, pack the courts. Meanwhile, you have added countless conservatives to different bodies. What is your reasoning for this?
Well, Biden just doesn't believe in the Constitution. I've appointed 3 amazing justices who uphold the Constitution every single day. Joe Biden wants to stomp on our Constitution and appoint and try to pack the courts to undo what I rightfully did. When the Senate of one party holds the majority, throughout history, they've always appointed a justice. That's how it works. I appointed a justice because the Supreme Court is supposed to have 9 justices. And if Joe Biden were to win, which he won't, by the way, Joe Biden will not become president of the United States. If he were to win, he would try to pack the courts. You got AOC, you got Ed Markey, they're all saying to pack the courts. Joe Biden, say you won't pack the courts. I want to hear Joe Biden say that he will not pack the courts because he's going to pack the courts. I'd like to hear it from him right now. Can you say that you will not pack the courts, Joe Biden?
Vice President, please respond.
Well, what you've done is essentially pack the courts. You've appointed.
But will you or will you not pack the courts, Joe Biden?
What you've done is so much.
Are you going to or not?
And your justices are going to overturn important Supreme Court cases like Roe.
They're going to uphold the Constitution, but are you going to pack the courts?
Let Vice President respond, President Trump.
I can't speak on that.
Okay. Well, I think this is a great chance to move on to our next issue, which is the economy. Jobs reports over the last 7 months would indicate a dire situation for many Americans. So this question is for both of you gentlemen. If elected, what would you do to improve the economy? First, we'll hear from Vice President Biden.
When I become president, to improve the economy, the first thing I'm going to do on the first day is pass a stimulus check to help Americans who have been hurt from the coronavirus pandemic. We're also going to invest in renewable energy like wind energy and solar power in order to create new markets and new businesses for millions of Americans to work for. This president has said that we're going to have a V-shaped recovery from the coronavirus, but I believe that we're actually going to have a K-shaped recovery because those at the top are able to recover far faster than those at the bottom. And the economy under my administration would make sure that all Americans are able to recover.
Okay. Thank you, Vice President Biden. And Mr. President, the same for you. If you were to win a second term, what would you do to help improve the economy?
Look, under my first 4 years as president, I built the greatest economy ever. The Dow Jones has been hitting record highs throughout my entire presidency. And I chose to shut it down. And now I'm going to reopen it, and it's going to become even better than it was before. It's going to become the greatest economy ever yet again. Joe Biden wants to kill jobs. They said I couldn't bring back the auto jobs. I brought back the auto jobs. I have brought back so many jobs. Unemployment is at record lows under my presidency. Joe Biden, he wants to kill those jobs. Him and AOC want to bring the Green New Deal and kill so many jobs with energy, with oil, and all of that. They want to kill all those jobs, and I say no. I want to say keep those jobs. Joe Biden wants to kill fracking. I don't want to kill fracking. He wants to institute wind turbines. Wind turbines are bad for our environment. They kill birds. Birds get caught up in those wind turbines and they die. So,
all right. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mr. President. And Vice President Biden, a chance to respond or maybe elaborate on some of your own plans.
All right, so this president believes that creating new industries is gonna harm our economy, and I just don't see how that's true. Another thing that I would like to elaborate on in that I would do under my administration is raise the minimum wage, because that would help Americans who are not able to make a living wage, and it would help everyone to be able to get to a certain standard of living, which would then mean that everyone can work harder and be able to create new industries and develop new technologies.
All right. And Mr. President, a last chance at responding before I ask you a question.
I got nothing else to say on this topic other than I built the greatest economy ever, and I will do it again.
All right. All right. So moving on the issue, I have a question for you, Mr. President. Mr. President, you passed what you tout is the largest tax cut in American history, yet studies have shown that those cuts went mostly to those who are already wealthy. How say you on this issue?
Look, I cut the biggest tax cuts in history. That's absolutely right. I cut taxes on every single tax bracket, on all of them. It's good for Americans. It's good for everyone. Joe Biden, he's going to raise taxes. He's going to take away your income as Americans. Me, I cut taxes. Like I said, more than that, I cut regulation. For every new regulation I introduced, 2 regulations were cut. And that's true. I held to that promise. I cut taxes. I cut regulations. Joe Biden wants to raise taxes. He wants to raise regulations and make it harder for American businesses to survive.
Yes, but Mr. President, I specifically asked about what you had to say about the majority of the tax cuts going to those who are already wealthy.
The tax cuts did go to those who are already wealthy, and they went to everyone else as well. My tax cuts are for everyone.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. Vice President Biden, you've said that your tax plan will not increase taxes on the middle class. Is that true? And if so, how will you pay for the lofty social programs that you so promise?
Thank you, Connor. Yeah, that is true that we're only going to increase taxes on the wealthy. We're not going to increase taxes on the middle class. And if we increase taxes on the wealthy, then we're able to pay millions of dollars to be able to pay for social programs that we've proposed. Under Trump's tax cuts, he's lowered taxes for the wealthy, but raised them on the middle class. And I believe that those who are the wealthiest should be paying the most to help support our country.
Okay, thank you, Vice President Biden. And Mr. President, what would you say in response?
Joe Biden wants to raise taxes. I want to lower taxes. It's as simple as that.
All right, thank you, Mr. President.
We'll now be moving on to the topic of election integrity. Mr. President, you've spoken about many allegations against Joe Biden and other top Democrats the past few weeks. Why should Americans trust you over established news outlets?
Well, because the news is fake. We've known this. CNN, they're fake news. So is everyone else. Hunter and Joe Biden, they're corrupt. Crack addict Hunter Biden has been dealing with some shady business, and quite frankly, they're trying to steal this election from me, but it's not going to happen. I'm not going to lose this election, and I'll tell you why. Because the American people know who is right for the job of President of the United States, and it's not Sleepy Joe Biden. It's me. They're trying to steal the election by trying to say mail-in voting and that's bad for our election integrity, quite frankly. Mail-in voting is known to have many faults, and that's why the Democrats are trying to push mail-in voting, because they know they can steal away this election, because I'm going to win in a landslide. And if they know the only way they can win this is if they cheat.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Trump alleges you had shady business dealings with foreign countries and that your son is corrupt. How do you respond?
That is absolutely not true. This president is trying to make everyone distrust the system and distrust our election cycles. That's why he keeps saying that mail-in voting is unreliable. He's trying to make you, the Americans, think that mail-in voting is corrupt and that it compromises our election integrity. And in doing that, he's trying to prevent you from voting. So if you really want to be able to change the way that our country looks, you need to vote. Please go and vote. You can mail in vote. You can early vote. You can vote on election day. Just please vote.
Mr. President, would you like to respond?
I think Joe is absolutely right on one thing, that we need to vote. Another thing people need to do is join the politics club at Natick High School. But more importantly, Hunter Biden and Joe Biden are corrupt. They deal with foreigners, and they're trying to take away our election. Hunter Biden is a crack addict and a scumbag. Joe Biden is also a scumbag, but I don't think he's addicted to crack.
Mr. Biden, do you have a final response?
This president is completely hypocritical. This president was impeached for being corrupt in dealing with Ukraine. This president has been involved in multiple scandals in which he's been accused of corruption. He can't turn it around and accuse me of being corrupt when that's absolutely not true.
Thank you.
And now on to our final topic, election media coverage. My first question goes to Vice President Joe Biden. Vice President Biden, you have stated that you will, quote, respect the outcome of the election if President Trump is reelected. Some have argued that President Trump will not follow in your footsteps. What is your plan for if Trump refuses to concede power?
Thank you, Hayden. As I was saying before, all of you Americans need to go out and vote. If we overwhelmingly vote this president out of office, he cannot stay in office any longer. We need to vote him out, and the only way for us to be able to show our opinions on how this president has dealt with the coronavirus and with everything that's going on in our country right now is to go out and vote. So please, if you respect our democracy at all, please go out and vote and vote. Even if you don't vote for me, though I really hope you do vote for me, please just go out and vote and participate in the democratic process. That's the only way that we can make our voices heard.
Thank you, Vice President Biden. This question now goes to President Trump. Mr. President, you have rebuked the media, accusing them of censorship, particularly during this election. You have also brought up the accusation that certain ballots are being mailed to fake people. If reelected, how will you ensure this election is valid and that, quote, fake news regarding it is not being circulated?
The fake news media is absolutely censoring so much information about this election. The news story about Hunter Biden's laptop was banned on Twitter. You couldn't put it there. Twitter's controlled by a liberal mob, and they're playing favorites, and their favorites are the Democrats. About the ballots being mailed to fake people, that is absolutely true, and that's the Democrats again trying to find a way to steal this election from me. And the fake news media and everyone else is trying to steal this election from me. But the American people have spoken. They want President Trump. That's just a fact.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vice President Biden, do you have a response?
I just want to speak to all of the American people. Please don't let this president scare you out of voting. You can mail in vote. Just please vote, and vote as soon as you can. Millions of ballots have already been cast, and we've been having a record turnout for this election. So please, if you take anything away from this whole debate, please go out and vote and speak up for the issues that you think are important.
Mr. President, a response?
Other than the slander that Joe Biden's been throwing at me, I agree. We should all go out there and vote. But be sure to vote in person if possible, because the mail-in ballots are not to be trusted.
Thank you to our candidates for joining us tonight for this productive discussion on the issues that affect us greatly. Before we wrap up tonight's debate, along with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, there are two other parties running candidates on most U.S. state ballots. We now will hear a word on third-party candidates in the Massachusetts ballot questions for 2020.
I am Joe Jorgensen, and I am proud to provide a real choice for president because the non-choice between Trump and Biden is an option between big government and more big government. Big government mandates and problems created these problems, and to solve them, we need to make the government smaller, much, much smaller. We have the highest imprisonment rate in the world, even higher among racial minorities and the poor. I will eliminate all nonviolent drug offenses and decriminalize all drugs. I will bring our troops home from messy, costly, and unnecessary wars, and will eliminate tariffs that are destroying markets for American farmers. What Americans need now is less government rather than more. I am Joe Jorgensen for the Libertarian Party, and I am on your ballot.
I'm Howie Hawkins, representing the U.S. Green Party. We stand for environmentalism, grassroots democracy, gender equality, LGBTQ rights. We are anti-war, anti-racist, and support eco-socialism. We are left with a choice between two pro-war, institutionally racist candidates who will not do anything to help solve global warming. The U.S. Green Party candidates will appear on your Massachusetts ballot.
Politics Club holds virtual meetings every Thursday. Please email any of the names displayed here to get connected with the Politics Club and join. All views and ideas are welcome, and students of all political knowledge levels are invited. Thank you for watching. Thank you to our candidates, and please vote in the NHS mock election on Monday, November 2nd. And if you're over 18, vote on November 3rd. Thank you.